It's been good, mate.
Yeah.
The little girl's still asleep, so
Oh,
but Mart's home today, so
right.
she
I
can
was going
look
to say,
after her if she
are we
wakes up.
running? Are we running the gauntlet for waiting for her to wake up, or not? Is that what's
Nah,
going on?
that was just last week. Mart had to go into the shop, so I was here by myself with her. So
Yeah, nice, nice. All right, so we'll give these dudes and dudettes a couple of minutes to come into this one live. And what do you got planned for the weekend, brother? You working, working?
uh no, we're actually
Oh,
going down to Sydney to the Good Things Festival
what's
because
good things?
Martine's it's a festival.
Right.
So Martine's a big fan of Fall Out Boy, so and they're headlining. Yeah. So it was like and because there was her 1 year anniversary since
Anniversary,
her transplant yesterday, so she went, "This is what I want to do." So
yeah. So good.
yeah, bringing
Getting the
back the
pingers,
old
man.
days,
The
mate.
pingers. How good. So good. Hey, good morning, guys. What is going on? I hope you are well. So, we're going to get this episode started, and it's going to happen in 2 minutes. This is going to be all about injury prevention and what else? How to rehab, how to treat them when they appear. And so, if you've obviously got any questions that you want to ask during the course of this one, guys, you want me to ask, then please do so. Look at this, we've got everyone streaming in. So good. We're going to start in 1 minute, guys. So, good morning, Ash. First one in, girlfriend. I hope you're good. Hey, Kaylee, what's happening, mate? Sean's here as well. Good morning, Shawnee. Good morning, guys. I don't know who that is. So get down and there should be a restream link above in the post. You can click that and I can see who you are. Hey, Kara, how are you, mate? Now, Jules says, morning, gents. Hey, nice men's shirts, Jace. We're still waiting on the Warriors version. Now, Jules, I can't see where you're watching this. If you are watching it on my public profile, feel free to tag Michael DeBarry. He's one of our OG clients, and I'm waiting for him to help us with some design stuff because he designed the wolf shirt. Fuck, we look good here together, mate. Look at this. I'm just way more massive than
I
you.
knew you were going to wear the blue one, so I thought I'm going to wear the white one.
So good. Who does it better? Who does it better? I think Troy's definitely got me there. I look a bit orange under this light. Anyway, guys, we're starting in 30 seconds. Good morning, Loz. I hope you're well. Good evening. I don't know who I've got there, but it's good. Shans is here. Nicky Boy's here. Look at this. So, guys, let me frame this up the right way. I'll explain how the podcast is going to work, but if you have any questions, please ask them. This is going to be a podcast that we can refer back to send people when they say, "What do I do when I just injured my shoulder?" Or "Oops, I just twinged my hamstring. Should I keep training?" We want to use this as a podcast reference, okay? So please, if you've got some good questions, they're going to be questions for everyone. So please ask them in the comments. We ready to go, Troy?
Yeah, mate.
Yeah, we're good? Cool. All right, let's do this. On the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the Better Body Academy podcast. This is the podcast that you come to when you are sick of the dumb diets and unsustainable programs. I am joined today by one of my best mates in the entire world, Mr. Troy McClellan. I've known this guy since we were, 5 years old? I think it was.
5 years old, mate. Kindergarten.
Wow. Wait till I share with you the story I wrote one day about me and Troy when I was in kindergarten. Pretty fascinating, really. Riveting stuff. Troy is walking on the moon. Jace is walking on the stars. Clint is walking on the sun. It is fun. That's come from a kindergarten student, guys. You've heard it first on the podcast. Oh, my memories, Troy. My memories.
You're the only one that could probably write properly. Everyone else is just like.
True enough. All right, guys. So we're here this morning to discuss everything around injuries. And so what we're going to do is divide the podcast into 3 parts. So the first part of the podcast is, how do I mitigate injuries? That's the first thing. How do I prevent them? The second thing is, what do I do the moment that I actually get an injury? Okay? Immediately. The third thing is, what do I do after I injure myself in terms of where should my focus be going forward after that injury actually happens. Because we get a lot of clients that say things like, look, I just injured my shoulder. Like, oh my God, I don't know what to do now. I can't train with anything. So what should you do under those circumstances? So that's how the podcast will be organized. So let's start off by talking about, firstly, mitigating injury risk. If you are pushing yourself, okay, if you're a guy or a girl and you are in your mid-30s, after your 40s and thereafter, the chances are you're going to have some niggling injuries. It's almost like the only way that you're going to prevent injuries is if you stay in bed and do nothing. And then obviously you get diabetes, right? So it's always this kind of, think of it like a seesaw, right? It's always going to be this balance between how do I push myself enough to get a return on my time invested in exercise, and how do I not push myself too hard that I put myself into a position where injury risk is likely. And an example of that would be pushing to do a weight that you compromise your form and you twinge something. So just as a start discussion, you kind of got anything to add to that about the prevention versus sort of push? Troy, is that apt?
Yeah, so it's like you said it on a few of them, where people can overdo things and then underdo things. So that overdo things is a lot of people. The biggest thing is that rest period
Mm,
is where people will be doing something that one day, not rested enough, and then they'll go in and do exactly the same things that same day. So we're putting that stress over that muscle way too much, and that's when the injury comes. And then, like you said, on the other side, when you're not doing enough and we're working these muscles, then we start to lose that muscle, and that's when another injuries come.
that's a great way to explain it. So if you're not doing enough, you're actually increasing your injury risk. So an example
Yeah.
of this is if you're not getting into full range of motion exercise or movements, and then all of a sudden you go and pick up a bottle from your baby off the floor, you've just got into a position which you never get into in your entire life. I reckon there are 1,000,000,000 mums and dads around the world that have injured themselves trying to get their baby out of a cot. Because what you're effectively doing is a stiff leg deadlift or a Romanian deadlift, right? You're pulling them out of the. And if you're not used to doing a movement like that, then it's going to compromise the integrity of that body part if you're doing it incorrectly. And this leads me to a first point, and that is that there is no bad movement. There is no bad exercise. A lot of people, for example, say deadlift is a bad exercise. It's not a bad exercise. It's not the exercise that's the problem. It's the performance, the form that you're using that is the problem. Particularly if that form is not good with weight that is at the top end of what you can actually lift. That's where you're going to compromise. So to talk about injury prevention, let's go down the line of, Troy, some protocols for how do we do our best to reduce the risk, even though we can't prevent an injury. How can we reduce the risk? Talk to us firstly about static stretching, because I think one of the biggest myths of of what we used to do, for example, when we're in footy, right? We'd all get in a circle and the coach or the manager would sit down and we'd be on the ground and we'd be doing a bunch of like, hold this stretch, hamstring stretch for 30 to 60 seconds. What's your understanding of the science around whether that works or not?
Yeah, so the research around that is stuck in that one position, and yes, you get in the elasticity into it, which is good. So it can be good just to do it every now and then, but to hold that stretch for a long period of time, it's not going to give you any benefit because it's not actually. We want it to be more dynamic so we can actually have movement because our bodies move in
Mm,
all different directions. So the muscle needs to be doing its eccentric, concentric movements
mm,
constantly to be able to get that blood flow and create those muscles. So if we're just holding it in that one position, it's
Hmm.
under tension for a way too long, which can be detrimental for when you're doing any movement because
So
it
to
actually
so to give
hasn't
a
actually got it. Yeah.
yeah, to give an explanation then of why that's the case, using your point here, you're keeping the muscle stretched is like holding a rubber band in a lengthened position for a long period of time. And because it's in that
Yeah.
stretched position for a long period of time, it actually loses its elasticity. And so this is why static stretching, where you just hold your leg up behind you as a quad stretch, or you get on the ground and reach out and hold your toes as a hamstring stretch, this has been shown to be pretty detrimental, in fact. In fact, it increases the likelihood of injury because what happens is you're in that stretched position for a long period of time, so it's like the rubber band's becoming loose. In terms of performance going into the gym, the modern science has showed that it actually decreases performance. Because if you think about something like a squat, when you drop into a squat, part of the upwards phase of the squat, it's like the rubber band is jamming back into place and out. It's going like this. So if all the tension in your muscles is being constantly lengthened by the static stretching, then you lose that elastic recoil of your muscles. So the first thing is with static stretching, people that are really into their flexibility, maybe there could be a long term or a medium term benefit, but over a certain point, to be too flexible is not beneficial. And in terms of performance, static stretching has been shown to actually reduce performance. So that's the first point to take away. So let's go now to what other things typically cause injury. Like in your experience as an in-person personal trainer, what are the main ways that people injure themselves, and why has that actually happened?
So like, especially in gym, it's usually the ego lifting.
Mm,
So you're putting too much load on the muscle to what it can do for you.
right.
That's why we have to go in that progressive movement. So people can jump straight up into doing too much weight.
Mm,
And then most of the time, it's just not understanding where their body position is when they're doing a certain movement. So um, overuse. So people in work, if they're doing things overhead, like painters, things like that, and they're constantly just this all day, and it's just in that one position, massive overuse and repetition.
right. And so, what I'd add to this as well is the chances of you doing an injury when you are tired are highest. Okay. So, if you look at all the data that sort of shows like what are the risk factors for injury and therefore what can you target to reduce injury, probably the number one out of everything is get enough sleep. Now, I don't know about you guys. I know this firsthand because when I was trying to maintain my training through the birth of my boy, uh, I was going in with like 2 or 3 hours sleep into the gym because I wanted to be consistent. But the problem was I was so tired that what was actually happening is I was drifting off during the performance of my movements. As Troy said, not holding perfect form. And then what was happening as a consequence of that is I was putting myself into positions that I shouldn't have been in and twinging little bits. I've never been so sore. So apart from the fact that sleep is integral to recovery from a gym session, sleep is also important for you to be able to maintain alertness so that you're not falling asleep mid-movement. Does that make sense? Now, I'm sure a lot of you women would absolutely resonate with that when you kind of twinge something when you're coming off the back of a late night and it's just impossible. For you shift workers, this is a big problem. So you should prioritize sleep. Troy, can you give a general guideline regarding the kind of lifting too much weight thing? Is there a general way to explain to someone what's the right amount of weight to lift? Like, because that's a pretty common question that we get, right? Well, I don't know how much to lift. How would you coach a person through that question?
It comes back to what is your goal? Like, what is the program that you are working? So, there's so many different elements to training muscle for growth, for strength, power, all this kind of stuff. So where programs are set, the rep range, that basically is determining the weight. So if we want to go into more power, like we're going to become a power lifter, and we just want to be lifting heavy, so short reps, it's just working to that rep to failure
Right.
where you're in good form. So it doesn't matter if you're doing 2 reps or if you're doing 12 reps. We're grabbing a weight that we can do to those reps with good form.
So the statement would be the amount of weight that you should lift is the maximum amount of weight that you can complete with perfect form for the said amount of reps in the program.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm going to say that again because this is the most common question we get around like beyond like how do I get into the gym because I'm really intimidated. Is how much weight, how do I know what to choose a weight? This is the way to choose it. It's the weight, the maximum weight that you can lift with perfect form in a target rep range of your program. So let's use an example. Let's say that we're talking about a bicep curl. A really simple example, a bicep curl. And the rep range of your program is 10 to 12 reps. And you find that on rep 7, you're starting to kind of like swing the weight up and move it a little bit more with your body and your back. Not only are you risking injury, but you're taking the tension off the muscle that you're trying to use. So what we want to do is, in this case here, the weight is too heavy. So we need to step it back, maintain perfect form, and then get to the 10 to 12 reps. In the converse, if you're doing 15 reps and your program's saying 10 to 12, and you're maintaining perfect form for 15 reps, it's too light. So always let the rep count determine how much you're actually lifting. Okay, let's talk a bit about what a perfect warm-up should look like, Troy. Like what's if you were just saying to someone, they said to you, look, okay, static stretching's no good, I take your point and I understand why. So what should I do?
So you want to be doing a little bit of mobility work. So if a lot of times people don't want to do this full body, you know, mobility work. So just think about what are you doing for that day, for that session. So if you're going into the gym and you're saying, okay, I'm just doing chest today,
Right.
then do chest movements to create blood flow, to get those transmitters from your nervous system to tell your body this is what's working. So, for example, if we're doing chest, then I would grab a band, have it around, and then I'd be just going into my motions of what I'm doing to start to tell my body this is what's going. And what I'm actually fully doing there is I'm getting that body to go into that dynamic stretch. So I'm still getting that length in the muscle and then the shortening of the muscle, but it's not under any load. It's only under a small amount. So it's teaching it to go, we're going to be working here today.
Right. Okay. So with dynamic stretching, can you give us a clear definition between the difference of static stretching? We know what it is. How is dynamic stretching different?
So dynamic stretching is more, so we're going to be more functionality sort of thing into what we're doing. So dynamic stretching is stretching the muscle, so the lengthening of the muscle, but in a movement. So we're going to go through that eccentric, concentric side of things. So we're
Not
going to
just the
lengthen the muscle,
stretch.
then we're going to short. Yeah.
Right.
So there's two parts to movements, eccentric, concentric.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we're just focusing on that eccentric side and having that length, that's where you're talking about before, about where it can be overworked.
Yes.
So then when you're doing the contracted side, it's not going to be doing its thing to its most potential. So we need to work the eccentric and concentric. So we're going to go through those movements.
Okay. Okay. And
So
what
it's
about the
movement.
role of say? What about the role of say? Something like arm circles or crossbody. Like this is all encompassing. We're talking the opposite of holding a fixed position. We're talking how do we take the joint that we're about to use and the muscles that we're about to use through full range of motion so that we're not just getting into the movement and going, oh shit, oh, that hurts. So for me, that would
Because we need to
include,
be, yeah, four, like basically looking at it as like four-dimensional kind of thing. So
right.
full ranges of movement, not just one-dimensional. Okay, we're just going to go up there.
Yeah.
That's we need to be working that full movement in all directions.
Okay. So if I was doing a squat day, and I was starting off with squat because they're usually the top set, the top exercise of a well written program is the compound movement. So I would
Yeah.
just generally what mine would look like is when I get into the squat rack, I am actually doing some squat movements, body weight squat movements, right? I'm also doing things like holding on to the bar and just like bending my knees down to get myself into the position of having bent knees. I'm also doing things like just gentle torso twists and bend overs, like rolling my spine down and then rolling my spine up to get some mobility in the areas that I'm trying to work. I don't want to just like go into the squat rack and go, all right, boom, because that's the moment that the joints aren't warmed up. Do you believe in like any form of pre dynamic stretching cardio? Do you think there's a role for that? Do you think it's necessary? What are your thoughts?
So it is good to get the blood flow going.
Right.
So our our muscles work off the oxygenated blood flow to, open up the vessels and stuff like that to create growth, everything like that. So to get a little bit of movement, just if you go on the treadmill, walk for 5 minutes, and then you can come back and then start sort of your sessions. It's not overly strenuous.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're after. It's just creating a bit of blood flow happening
Get the core temperature up a
through
little.
your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So finally, what I do want to talk about is sub-maximal sets. So guys, if I'm going to do a 100 kilo squat, I'm not going to walk in and do a 100 kilo squat first up. My warm-up is going to look like this. I'm going to walk for about 5 minutes. I'm going to come into the squat rack and do some dynamic stretching while I envisage myself about to move the weight that I'm about to put onto this bar. I'm starting to get into the mental preparation here. Then what I'm going to do is some sub-maximal sets, which are exactly what they sound like. If I'm aiming to do a working set of 100 kilos, what I'm going to do is firstly do some body weight squats. A small set of body weight squats, maybe 8 to 10 body weight squats, just to start. I'm then going to just put the bar on my back, which is 20 kilos, and I'm just going to do 10 sets of bar squats to get used to that movement. I'm then going to put on, so let's talk about 100 kilos is 2 plates, right, plus the bar. What I'm going to do first is 1 plate. So I'm effectively doing close to 50% of my working weight at about 6 to 8 repetitions. I'm then going to add on another half plate, and I'm going to do 6 to 8 repetitions. I don't want to tire myself. I don't want to exhaust myself, but I do want to get used to the movement. And then I'm going to go in and do the 2 plates. Does that make sense? So I've graduated up from a body weight, a bar, 1 plate, 1.5 plate. There's 4 warm-up sets that I've gone through. In addition to the dynamic stretching, I'm now ready to lift heavy. Where the mistake comes is when you are tired because you've been up all night with a baby or you're coming off the back of a shift. It's early in the morning because you've got to work out before he or she wakes up again. You get to the gym without any form of cardio warm-up, so you're cold, and you walk straight in and try to lift a heavy weight, and that's where you twinge things. So let's say that's exactly what happens, Troy. And someone comes in and twinges a shoulder, doing a bench press, or they twinge a hamstring. Like, it's hard to know the severity of that injury once you've done it. So what should you actually do? Like, do you diagnose yourself? What do you do?
Yeah, so if you feel that there's a twinge, you'll know if it's serious or not. If you do feel it and you're thinking, "Oh, it's sort of serious," then it's serious enough.
Right.
So we don't want to really be working through an initial injury because, like you just said, we don't know the full extent to it just yet.
Mm.
So if we can get to it before we actually push it further, the recovery time could be halved.
Right.
because we haven't made it worse.
Wow. How about
So
that for a
it's
theory? If you literally stopped immediately during the set that you just injured yourself, versus and particularly because you've probably injured yourself doing a heavy top set anyway, meaning if you try to complete the set, you're probably going to injure worse because now your joint or whatever you've injured is compromised. So you're actually going to push through that set further and maybe do more damage. So what you could potentially do is save yourself weeks of rehab within that split second, 20 seconds. Wow, when you think about that. Yeah. So should you just stop mid-set if it feels like, oh, you should stop mid-set? Because what I've typically done is gone, oh, fuck, that hurt. I'll just finish off this set. Really, I'm thinking in hindsight, that's a bad idea.
yeah. So it goes off what we just said. So like I would just stop because I'd rather just go throw that session away and just it's one day
One day.
and then go, let's just go and look after this and see what it is. And then I can come back at it because it might just be a slight twinge, like a strain in your muscle where
Mhm.
we just put a little bit of ice or all that kind of stuff. And then the next day you wake up and you're fine and then you can get back to it.
Right.
You've only missed that one day.
Yes.
If you push through it and then you put it under more stress, under more load, a small little tear could end up being big.
Mm.
And then you're out for weeks and weeks.
So, like,
So,
does it go into? I know that you're really strong with rehab, but what about like diagnosis? How do you like? You might have a real good sense of self because you're in touch with your body. But what about to the average person who twinges a chest muscle or twinges a hamstring, and they're like,
yeah.
well, I don't really know the severity of it. Like, it's a little bit painful, but it's like medium painful. It's not excruciating, but like, what do you do? How would you?
Yeah, so I'd start off with, so ice, when it comes to an injury, applying ice is one of the first things that you should be doing, especially for the first like 2 days,
Okay.
because we want to constrict the blood flow to stop a lot of inflammation. So the inflammation is the body's way of protecting itself, but we don't want a lot of that swelling there.
Right.
So we want that ice on there. And then you can start over that sort of day of after the injury, you'll start to get a sense of, is it getting worse? Is it getting better?
Right.
And then that's when you reach out to doctor, physio, someone with that higher knowledge who might have to just do a scan or have a look at it, and then you'll know the extent of it or what you need to do next. So
So to someone that is, so how does, like, this might be sound like a silly question, but what do you do if the pain's persisting? Do you have to go to a GP first to get a referral to a physio, or can you call a physio from the internet and just book in direct?
you can call a physio. It depends on the type of like scan or anything like that that you need to go and get. So some scans you need to have a referral from a doctor.
Right.
So
But
even if you go and see a physio,
let's say you're in the position where you didn't know that you needed a scan. Let's just say you just like literally
yeah,
twinged your hamstring. You wanted to get back to training. It's a medium level of pain. It's not excruciating, but you can still walk. Like, I'm even confused at what I'd do there. My treatment would be for myself. I'd probably just not use that body part for a period of time, which is going to go into the next part of our discussion.
yeah.
I'd probably just avoid training that for a week and see how it is. Would you do the same thing? And do you think that's good advice?
Yeah, I would because like I know a lot about it, but yeah, so you'd give yourself like sort of 3 days. Do the ice, let it rest, let it do its healing process
Hmm.
and see what it comes back at you like.
Right.
If you go to move after those 3 days and you're still feeling it, then yes, I'll go and see a physio first.
Right.
So they can give you a bit of a prognosis before you have to go sort of do other things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that encapsulates it good. That's simple enough. So what we're going to recommend here is that you injure yourself, you tweak something, and it's not an open wound, or you haven't dropped the bar on your face and smashed your skull. You've literally done something muscular or joint based. Maybe you've twinged your back. The first port of call would be to go home, ice it as much as possible, give it a couple of days of which you don't utilize that, say 3 to 5 days, reevaluate in 3 to 5 days and go, how does it feel? Is it getting worse? Is it getting better? And if there's no real improvement, that's at the point where you probably want to jump on the internet, Google, or ask for a referral to your local physio. Then go down and see them and see they will be able to discuss whether through putting you into some various positions, whether it's likely that it's just a rest and let time do its thing, or whether it's something you need to get scans for further diagnosis about. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Cool.
Definitely.
Okay, that's nice and clear. So the last part of the discussion that I want to talk about is, let's say that you do have an injury where the physio has diagnosed you with a local muscle tear in a bicep. I'm guessing it's probably going to be dependent on where the exact injury is. So for example, if it's a bicep injury that's kind of mid-muscle, you just can't do a lot of bicep work or chin-ups or bicep curls, but you might be able to get away with doing tricep push-downs and, of course, all leg movements. But if it's a shoulder injury, which is probably the most common injury, would you agree?
Yeah, it's one of the most common, that and back.
That and back, yeah. So that's going to be involved in everything from doing uh, standing calf raise machine to squats to flies and bench press. So like, what's the general rule here? Am I right in thinking it depends on the specific site and how should you proceed with your training after the point?
Yeah, so it does come back to your specific side of where the injury is. So, if the injury is sort of in your hips, you can't really do too much leg work a lot of the times if you don't ha if you're restricted in your movement, but you can do a lot of upper body. So it just depends on where it is to start with. But when it comes to training, the studies that have been done has actually beneficial to keep training, but not say the injury. So let's just take, a shoulder and this side is immobilized, can't do it. What the studies are showing, it's called cross education. So by working that other side that is still good, it does send signals still to that other side, and that other side won't lose what it will maintain, and sometimes even still get a little bit of strength out of it, still working that other side. Now, the studies, what it has shown, they worked on the load under the eccentric side.
Right.
So, say we're doing bicep, and I've done that bicep, but this one's still good. I just won't do that one, but I can still do this one where I'm doing a little bit more slower on that eccentric side. What the studies found was people that were doing this against people that weren't, they still got maintained and still got receptors happening through there because the whole body works as one.
Isn't it just like fucking mind blowing when you think about that? Because they've even shown studies whereby thinking about doing a bicep curl, and you would know this,
Yeah,
and not just like, oh, I'd like to do a bicep curl like Homer Simpson style. Like, we're talking about like
yeah,
literally getting in the zone and thinking about flexing the muscle and doing a bicep curl, but not actually doing it, does lead to an increase in the muscle. And what Troy's saying is that actually not doing this one, but doing this one actually translates to this one, which is fascinating. And this comes back to what we've been talking about with reverse dieting. What is the signal that you're sending to your body when you reverse diet? It is that calories are coming back in, you can increase my metabolism. What is the signal that you send to your body when you do resistance training? Well, to build muscle. What is the signal that you send to your body when you do a lot of cardio? Lose fat, lose total weight, break down muscle. We don't want all this muscle if we're going to do a bunch of cardio. And what Troy's saying here is that the signal is that even though you're not actually working the muscle physically, doing it on the other side translates. Cross-education. I've never heard that term, but it makes complete sense. The second part that I'm going to guess is that in any rehab, you're going to be in a worse position if you've completely immobilized something, some sort of joint, than if you actually just get some level of movement in it. Now, I'm guessing that in order to do that, if what we could do is really, if we are still going to work that specific area, we could do it, but under real control. And particularly when you're actually coming back to say, all right, things are looking good, I can start to train this again. I'm going to do it really, really slow tempo, half the load. I'm not going to go back to doing a 100-kilo squat like I was before I did the injury, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we want to really scale it back, even if it's just going body weight, just getting the movement in the muscle. Because if it is an injury where it's been immobilized and you haven't been able to use it,
Mm.
then that's when so the contraction, because of when we do an injury, it wants to, naturally our body wants to try and help, so it'll tighten everything up. And then when we go to, so say like if you put a rubber band in a freezer, it'll tighten right up. And then if you bring it straight out and then just pull it, it'll just snap.
Yeah.
So that's where we say to scale it back and then slowly just go through those movements, go to the range where you're comfortable, and then we can go that a little bit further. And then we can start to put a little bit of load on it
Right.
to start to stress it, start to rebuild the muscle and everything like that. Because it's like what you were talking about the other day about the muscle protein synthesis. That's sort of what it goes into, because the more that we can promote that, it stops the breakdown of the muscle,
Yes.
which will amplify injuries
And
because we
that,
need muscle in our body.
yeah, and that goes with when you do get an injury, understand that training is just one component, right?
Mm.
You would be well advised to not get drunk, to keep your intake intake up, to maintain your calories, your awareness around how you're sleeping and managing your stress, because all of those things still feed into the one big thing that is your body, right? It's not just that
Yeah.
training's just I can't do anything now. All right, I'm out for 2 months. It doesn't work like that. We've got to maintain the entire integrity. Now, if there is anything that you guys want to ask into the comments, there's still 10 or 15 people watching in live. Please let me know. I can ask those questions. Let me know if that is complete enough as a discussion for you to be able to know how to treat injuries. 2 final things while I wait for any questions. And again, this might sound like a silly question. What is the best way to ice one's self? Now, I'm asking this because I'm fucking terrible at it. I had an ankle injury, and you'd think of all things that ankle injuries would be the easiest thing to ice. What the hell do you do when you've got a hamstring injury or a back injury? So what's actually the best way to ice? Is the frozen peas good? Do you wrap it in towels? Like, what's the best way to actually do it?
It comes back to whatever you've got. So but if we can immobilize it onto the injury. So I have ones that I put an ice pack in, and then it's got a strap around, and it actually tightens back up onto itself. So I can wrap it around in any position, and it will just hold.
Right.
But if you don't have that, if you got frozen peas, have that, wrap a towel around so it holds it in position.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
sort of all. That's all we need. So
Yeah,
it doesn't really matter too much. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really know. And one final point, that have you by any chance seen the Netflix series? It's a short series called The Blue Zones. So
Blue zones.
it's
Don't think so.
it's a series on talking about longevity, and it goes around to, I think it's 5 or 6 different parts of the world where they have the longest life or the most amount of centenarians, so people reaching 100 years of age.
Well,
And they
actually,
say,
yeah, I think I have seen that. Yeah.
and they say, what is the thing that, like, what's the defining factor around why these people are living so long? And they do a deep dive into that. And one of the things that caught my eye the other day was when they talked about how people in Sardinia in Italy, little island that I've been to a couple of times, the people that live, even within a town, within a village, the people that live at the top of the town actually live, on average, much, much longer than the people that live at the bottom of the town. And all things aside, diet's the same, sunlight's the same, everything's the same. The only variable difference, what do you reckon it is? Can you think of offhand?
With the altitude.
Or that's what they thought it was, that they suspected it was the altitude. They concluded it was the number of steps. So
To get back home.
to get back to the top of the mountain. So some of
Yeah.
these homes were built on the side of slopes. So what has to happen is, and they said that they see the same thing in now. Ironically, my parents sold their house maybe 2 years ago to move down the street, literally down the street, as you know. The reason they sold their house was because they thought to themselves, as we're getting older, we don't want to have stairs. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense. And it wasn't until I saw that thing the other day that might have actually decreased their life expectancy by 2 to 5 years by getting rid of the stairs. So the reason I brought that up is we talked about the injury situation there is when you immobilize yourself and stop doing the stuff, you actually exacerbate the problem. So when it comes to injuries, what Troy is saying out of this is, if I'm paraphrasing, is you don't want to completely immobilize yourself. You don't want to stop walking, lay in bed, start drinking, go to shit. You want to keep doing what you can without compromising the injury further. And maybe that's the question to ask yourself. Is what I'm doing compromising it further, or is it just kind of nourishing my health whilst the injury progresses and repairs?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Finally, brother, is there anything that we kind of haven't covered in here that you think is relevant?
I don't think so. I think we've covered most things. I think the biggest thing is sort of what you just touched on there is we've got to look at it as a maintaining thing. If we've got an injury, a lot of people just go, oh, I can't do that. So that's,
Yeah.
everything goes to shit now. We're still got to maintain our body to be able to get back into what we're doing. So nutrition, if we can't train because of an injury, nutrition, because we've got to keep that protein to be able to tell our body hit the muscle. If we don't hit those protein targets, then our body's going to go in and using those muscle because it's saying we don't need it. So nutrition, making sure that we do get some movement, because we need to maintain. It's not about growth and getting, stronger, anything like that. It's about going, okay, we've injured ourselves. Let's try and maintain through this point, so then we can
And
start going that
actually,
way.
on that, that's a perfect reinforcement of the podcast episode that I did with Dr. Ginny, of which she said that the moment a person enters an aged care home, they have I believe it was a maximum life expectancy of 7 years, because of the fact that it incapacitates people. So our goal in life is to not incapacitate ourselves, guys. And so take that for what that's worth. I'm going to cut the podcast there because Troy and I we can waffle on a bit because we're nerds in this space and we really, really love this stuff. Anyway, thank you for coming on with me this morning, or rather I come on with you, brother. This is your normal slot, so I don't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah, mate.
Guys, this has been the Better Body Academy podcast, coming to you on an Australian Friday morning, Thursday for the rest of the world. I hope you guys are having a beautiful start to your day or finish, and we'll speak to you in the next episode.